and that's kind of the surface we'll be. So then we'll graden and scarify into that. We'll then re-level the playing surface. We'll reseed into that. We're reseeding around about 80 grams per square metre at this time now, and then when we get to top dressing we'll go over seeding again at another 40. So we kind of, our seed rates are very, very high, but because we're a tufted grass, we're in control of it. So once it's up and it goes to the, you know, to the 4 to 6 leaf stage, that's as thick as it will go. We're then in control and we can thin that out. But because we haven't got any stolons or rhizomes, we know that that isn't going to get any thicker, so it's a lot easier to control the ryegrasses in that way. So normally germination 5 days after, we put the covers down, germination's back up. Once it gets to around about 25 mil in height, we'll then start to bring that height cut down with rotaries and then go back into the cylinders. We'll get it back down to around about 10 mil, about 6 weeks after germination, and then we'll go on, and our top dressing is specifically made for us. It's the same construction as the bills themselves, and then we'll just go over, we'll top dress all the courts, and then we'll just drag mat them in, and we'll use the level lawns and get all of the levels back post championship. So ideally, once it's been top dressed, that's how thick our court will be. Bearing in mind it's still only about 6 weeks old. So by the time we go into winter, that grass canopy will close to the point where you can barely see the soil through winter. Once we get to winter, the ryegrass pretty much goes dormant, and then by the time you get into April, that canopy should just be finishing closing off. But at that point that we know that we've kind of got it there for ready for the following season. And then through October, March, it depends on the weather. So we have different programs. So it will be maintaining our height cut 13 mil. We'll start our winter program of wetting agent. So we've now started doing a program of wetting agent where we're spraying a penetrant every 4 weeks. Every 2 weeks we're actually doing a turf hardener as well. So it's part of our disease management. Unfortunately in the UK, or fortunately, depends how you look at it, a lot of pesticides now are getting either knocked on the head, not re-registered, or companies now are just not bringing them to market because there's just not enough comeback for profit. So we lost last year, we've lost our last contact fungicide, winter fungicide. So if we get an attack of Fusarium now, there's nothing you can do about it. It just runs riot and it will do what it's doing. So for us, it just means the turf manager has to go back to thinking about the old ways and the old days. So we also have what we call a turf hardener. So it's a mixture between an iron, potassium, calcium. So we're spraying that every 4 weeks in between the wetting agents. So every 2 weeks something's going down. We're either drying the leaf with the penetrant, or we're putting the turf hardener down that stays in the plant for about 4 weeks. And all it does is it just hardens off the cell wall for that 4 weeks. That just means that it just makes it more a better defence against the disease. Now
Don't use any silicon in that mix?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. And it seems to be working really well. There was a few coming over from the States now that use a bit of silicon stuff in some of these mixes. And again, through the STRI, once these come to market, we'll actually just give them to them and say, right, research that. Tell me if it's any good for grass courts. So I'm quite fortunate in that way that I get really healthy budgets. I think our club is probably one of the only sporting clubs in the world that will dictate X amount of money purely on tennis research. There's nobody else like you'd never get a Manchester United or an Arsenal looking at how best to prepare their pitches because they're in competition with everybody else. And we're in that fortunate position because we're not judged against anyone else. We almost get a bit of carte blanche about what we want to do. I feel very sorry certainly for the Premier League boys because there's 20 of them all doing the same thing. And even though they want to do something different because they feel they can't because if the pitch isn't quite right, not down to the maintenance of it, but because the players say, well, that pitch is a bit different, and then they find out, well, actually they're maintaining that different to the other 19. All of a sudden it's the pitch's fault. It's not. So I understand why a lot of them don't want to kind of put their head above a parapet, which is, sometimes can be unfortunate, but for us, it's a really good thing. And then with our mowers as well, so the mowers that we kind of helped develop a little bit the InfiniCut electrics. We can actually start taking the cylinders out and put saddle rollers in them. So last week, the week before I came over, we'd cut the courts the week before, and then we had a little bit of a cold snap. So the turf itself, the grasses had really slowed down. So we actually used that opportunity to swap out the cylinders, put saddles in, and the team went back out, and in effect cut everything again, but never took anything off the leaf. They were just saddle rolling. So we have that ability to swap bits in and out of our machinery, depending on when we need it. And again, we'll continue with our fertiliser programme. Post renovation, we'll go back into our autumn-winter granular feeds, and they'll be programmed in along with the turf hardeners and the wetting agents. They all become part of it. And then good old-fashioned monitoring for disease. The team go out every morning. They'll go dew brooming. Normally the day before we go cutting the grass during the winter, the guys will now go out, since we've been steaming, all the courts that have now been steamed, we have a regular program where the guys will go out with a knife and a bucket, and they'll walk the courts down the shades, and they go and pick out all the little poa plants that are either that are blowing in on the wind. So now that we've steamed and killed all of that seed bank of poa annua, we can now control it. So the guys will be going out all through the winter, hand picking poa out of the courts. Another one of those jobs that I'm not liked for, but the thing is, it's got to be done. And then measure root development. So what our aim is that if we maintain the courts correctly and get the spiking right and everything else, because it's a brand new ryegrass, it can certainly get its feet in. And we can get anything up to 200 mil development of root development on a good perennial ryegrass if the soil's right. Because we've got a good maintenance regime of our soils, and it's the organic matter is just right. It just means that the plant can develop really well. And this keeps happening to me. I adjusted this the other day, but it keeps jumping. So these are some of the headline points that we look at, and unfortunately it keeps jumping. On the laptop it looks fine, and then sometimes it then jumps. But that's just a couple of things. So our top dressing, we're ordering 200 tonnes a year for the courts, 10 tonne of grass seed we reapply every single year. Then there's a few measurements there from STRI. And this sort of thing is just championships. So that's how many times they'll test all of that. And all that data comes back to us every day. And then we'll look at the same time, we'll look at the irrigation programs that we're doing. We'll measure it against these numbers. We'll then look at the forecasts. So I'm again fortunate that we have the London or the UK Met Office. They bring in all of their weather systems in. So we have a room with screens where we're just watching weather patterns all across the UK to see where it's coming through. And in conjunction with them, we have another company called Météo France, and they're the French equivalent to the Met Office of the UK. So they have a commercial arm, so they do all of the Formula One stuff. So they follow the Formula One circuit, doing all the local weather patterns. So what happens is they come in for the championships. They set up a satellite 25 miles away from the championships, pointed at Wimbledon. The Met Office will track all the weather systems between all around the UK. As soon as it becomes within 25 kilometres of the club, they then hand it over to Météo France, and then their systems can actually detect fine drizzle when the edges of rain clouds will start and when they will stop. They will then track it for us, and then what will happen is that we'll always play until it starts to rain. Where this comes into its own is that if we know that weather front is going to finish in 20 minutes, we can then get the players ready to say, right, you're back on court in 20 minutes. We know in 15 minutes time we can start deflating the covers. So by the time that last drop of rain is finishing, we can have the covers off, we can have the nets up, we can have the players back out. So it just means that we can fine tune what we're doing for the championships. And again, that bottom one, for all the mathematicians in the room, is that centre court this is always a quiz. The club always do this as a quiz. So centre court is 902 square metres. We're sowing at about 80 grams per square metre. And then if you then see, I think it's 750 grass seeds per gram. is what the permitted sign is. So that calculation means that if all of the seed that we oversow in centre court, if it all germinates, by the start of the championships, we should have 54 million grass plants at the start of the championships. Not quite sure how many we have at the end, but it's always nice to have a big number to start with. And I think either questions or food. Depends how hungry you are.
Ask about wine casting.
Yes.
You see,
We do,
Yeah.
and that's part of one of the things we're doing with the steaming as well, is that we
Yeah.
can control worm casting as well. So it was originally it was designed for powered seed and bank control, but we've also found that the courts that we've steamed, we've done it in 2017, 2018 and 2019 on selected courts, because we go around and do about 5 courts a year. All the courts we've done so far, we've had no power engine come back, apart from windborne stuff that will be out. We've had no worm casts, where we've had worm casts before. And we've had no fairy ring for the last 3 years on those courts either. We've actually killed everything that's there. The problem is you're killing what is good, bad and indifferent.
Yeah.
And now that we're starting a PhD paper with an agricultural university up at Harper Adams, we're going to monitor the effects of steam sterilising sports root zones over the next 3 years, and we're actually going to release it as a paper just to see what happens. Because I think, certainly in the UK, it's going to be quite an important tool in the armoury, because there's less and less pesticide that we can actually control. So it's kind of going back to basics really for us.